My husband, Mark, pointed at the detailed business plan on our dining room table and let out a laugh. It wasn't a small chuckle, it was a loud, belittling sound that echoed off the high ceilings of the home I had helped him build. A cafe, Clara? Seriously? He said, wiping a fake tear from his eye. Babe, stick to hosting dinner parties. That's your lane. His sister, Jessica, sitting beside him, smirked. Don't be mean, Mark, she said, her voice dripping with poison. Maybe she can call it the bored housewife's hobby hut. The deepest betrayal wasn't the laughter, it was the look in his eyes. It was the same dismissive look he'd given me for 10 years, the one that said my dreams were small, silly, and insignificant compared to his world of corporate law. Have you ever had a dream so clear in your heart that someone else's scorn felt like a physical blow? A moment where you realize the person who was supposed to be your biggest supporter was actually your heaviest anchor. That night, I didn't just see my husband, I saw my future, and he wasn't in it. They thought I was a joke. They had no idea I was about to write the punchline. The scent of roasted duck and truffle oil still hung in the air, a ghost of the perfect evening I had tried so hard to create. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, and I had poured weeks of my life into this dinner. The guest list was a strategic map of Mark's world, his 2 senior law partners, a judge he was desperate to impress, and several high-net-worth clients whose business kept our life afloat. My mother, Brenda, was there, of course positioned next to Mark's sister, Jessica, a placement I now deeply regretted. I had imagined this night as a triumph. I had overseen every detail, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the 5-course meal I'd mostly cooked myself. I wanted to show them all, but especially Mark, that the organizational skills he praised when it came to his social life could be channeled into something more, something for me. All evening, I had felt a nervous flutter in my chest. It was the same feeling I got before a big presentation back in college, before I downshifted my own ambitions to support his. He was the star, and I was the stage manager, ensuring the lighting was always perfect for him. But tonight, I was going to ask for a small spotlight of my own. When the dessert plates were cleared and the port was being poured, I saw my opening. My heart hammered against my rib. Mark, darling, I began, my voice a little shakier than I wanted. Since it's such a special night, I wanted to share something I've been working on, something I'm really passionate about. He gave me a warm, performative smile, the one he used in court. Of course, babe. What is it? I slid the heavy, meticulously organized binder across the polished mahogany table. It was 50 pages long, bound in professional navy blue. It had market analysis, financial projections, a proposed menu, and a branding concept. Every detail was perfect. It's a business plan, I said, a hopeful tremor in my voice. For a cafe I want to open downtown. I'm calling it the Daily Grind. He picked it up, his eyebrows raising in surprise. For a single beautiful second, I thought he was impressed. He flipped through the first few pages, his eyes scanning the executive summary. Mr. Finch, his senior partner, leaned forward with genuine interest. A business owner in the family, Mark? That's wonderful. And that's when it happened. A small twitch at the corner of Mark's mouth, then a low chuckle that rumbled in his chest, then the full-throated laugh. It wasn't a laugh of joy or amusement. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated mockery. It was a sound designed to shrink me, to put me back in my place. The sound cut through the polite chatter of the room, and all eyes turned to us. My face burned hot with shame. A cafe, Clara? Seriously, he finally managed, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. The judge looked uncomfortable. Mr. Finch's smile had vanished. Mark was supposed to be performing for them, showing them what a power couple we were. Instead, he was performing at my expense. Babe, stick to hosting dinner parties. That's your lane. This is adorable. The word adorable landed like a slap. It was a verbal pat on the head, a dismissal of the hundreds of hours of work I had poured into that binder. Then Jessica, never one to miss an opportunity to twist the knife, chimed in with that syrupy, fake sweet voice of hers. "Don't be mean, Mark. It's a cute idea." She leaned in, her eyes glinting with malice. "Maybe she can call it the bored housewife's hobby hut, or Clara's little distraction." The table fell into a thick, horrifying silence. Mark's partners exchanged awkward glances. The judge cleared his throat and suddenly became fascinated by the pattern on his dessert plate. The silence was worse than the laughter. It was a vacuum, where support should have been. I looked desperately at my mother. I prayed for a word, a look, anything to defend me. But Brenda just stared down at her folded napkin, her shoulders hunched. She was a woman who valued appearances above all else, and I was currently creating a very ugly scene. Her silence was a betrayal as deep as Mark's laughter. She was my mother, but in that moment she chose them. She chose the comfort of her association with Mark's powerful family over her own daughter. I felt the room closing in on me, the air thick with my humiliation. I could feel their pity, their second-hand embarrassment. They weren't seeing a potential entrepreneur. They were seeing exactly what Mark and Jessica wanted them to see: a silly, useless woman with a pathetic little dream, a nobody. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. Every eye was on me. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice a raw, broken thing. I turned and walked out of the dining room, my back straight, my head held high, even as tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I didn't run. I walked with a purpose I hadn't felt before. I walked past the kitchen I'd commanded all day, past the foyer that I had decorated, and up the grand staircase to the second floor. I didn't go to our bedroom, to the king-sized bed we shared. I went to the guest room at the end of the hall. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, the cool wood a small comfort against my back. The sounds of forced, polite conversation resuming downstairs were a faint murmur. They had already moved on. My humiliation was just a brief, awkward pause in their evening. But for me, it was everything. I slid down the door and sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Later that night, long after the last guest had left, I heard Mark come upstairs. He didn't even try the door to our bedroom. He came straight to the guest room and knocked softly. "Clara, you're being a little dramatic, don't you think?" I didn't answer. "It was a joke, babe. Lighten up." A joke. He thought that gutting me in front of everyone who mattered in his life was a joke. I sat there in the dark, my arms wrapped around the business plan I had retrieved from the dining room table after everyone was gone. The heavy binder felt like a shield. No, not a shield. It was a weapon, and I was finally ready to learn how to use it. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. A thick, oppressive quiet had settled over the rooms that were filled with laughter and chatter just hours before. Mark was already gone. There was no note, no text, just an empty space on his side of the bed, and the lingering scent of his expensive cologne. It was his way of handling things. Ignore the problem until it went away, until I folded and apologized for being too sensitive. For 10 years that had been our dance. He would cross a line, I would get upset, and he would give me the silent treatment, until I couldn't bear the tension anymore, and waved the white flag, just to have peace in my own home. But this time was different. The peace he offered was a cage, and I was finally seeing the bars. I walked into the kitchen and saw the remnants of the dinner party: dirty glasses, stained napkins, a half-eaten dessert left on the counter. The mess felt symbolic of the wreckage of my marriage. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, so heavy it made my knees feel weak. For a moment, I leaned against the cold marble countertop and let the hopelessness sink in. He had won. He had successfully branded me as a fool, a woman with silly, unserious dreams. Who was I to think I could be anything more? But then, a different feeling started to bubble up from beneath the despair. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was a slow, burning ember of pure, unadulterated anger. It was the anger of a decade of being patted on the head, of having my opinions dismissed, of being told my contributions were limited to the domestic sphere, and in that anger a memory surfaced. It was a faint, dusty memory, something I hadn't thought about in years. My grandmother, Nana Rose. Nana Rose had been the opposite of my mother. She was fierce, independent, and had run her own small tailoring business out of her home for 40 years. When she passed away, she hadn't knit me much, not in the way of grand fortunes. She had left me an envelope. Inside was a check for $30,000 and a handwritten note on her floral stationery. I remembered the note perfectly. It said, "For a dream of your own, Clara. Not for anyone else's." When I had shown it to Mark, fresh in the glow of our new marriage, he had scoffed. Not cruelly like last night, but in that dismissive offhand way of his. "That's sweet," he'd said. "It's some nice pocket money. We'll put it in a savings account. It'll be there if you ever need a new car, or something." And I, the trusting, supportive wife, had agreed. The money had sat in a low-yield account for nearly a decade, forgotten, pocket money. To him, it was insignificant. But to me, right now, it was a declaration of independence. It was a lifeline thrown to me from the past by the one woman in my family who had truly believed in having a dream of your own. A surge of adrenaline shot through me. I went to my desk, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I found the bank statements for that old, dusty account. The $30,000 was still there, having earned a pitiful amount of interest over the years. It was still my pocket money. I spent the next hour online, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I found a bank that specialized in small business accounts. On the application, where it asked for my name, I didn't type Clara Blackwood. I typed my maiden name, the name that was on the check from my grandmother, Clara Davies. The final step was transferring the funds from the joint savings account to my new secret account. My hand trembled as I hovered the cursor over the confirm transfer button. This felt more significant than moving into the guest room. This was a tangible act of separation. It was me, taking back a piece of myself that I had allowed Mark to control. I clicked the button. The screen flashed, "Transfer successful." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I felt a dizzying sense of freedom. The rest of the day was a blur of secret activity. I turned the guest room, my sanctuary of sorrow from the night before, into my war room. I cleared out the closet, hiding my laptop, the business plan, and a stack of new notebooks under a pile of old blankets. I wasn't looking at home decor blogs or online recipes anymore. My search history became a litany of entrepreneurial ambition. How to form an LLC in this state. Best online courses for restaurant management. Small business loan requirements. Barista essentials and coffee sourcing. I enrolled in 2 online certificate programs, paying for them with my new debit card, the one that said Clara Davies. Every time I heard a car pass by the house, my stomach would lurch, and I'd quickly minimize all the windows on my screen, switching to a generic news website. The secrecy was exhausting, but it was also a source of incredible power. I was building something in the shadows, a new version of myself that Mark knew nothing about. He would come home at night, complaining about his long day, and I would play my part. I'd ask about his cases, warm up his dinner, and listen with a supportive nod. All the while my mind was racing with thoughts of supply chain logistics and profit and loss statements. I was living a double life, and for the first time in a very long time, one of those lives was entirely my own. The grind had begun. My search for a physical location for my cafe began in the least glamorous way possible, scrolling through endless online listings of commercial properties for rent. Most were either astronomically expensive, located in the gleaming heart of the financial district, or so far out in the suburbs they might as well have been in another state. I was looking for a needle in a haystack, a place with good foot traffic, decent bones, and a landlord who might be willing to take a chance on a first-time business owner with a dream and a shoestring budget. After weeks of dead ends, I found it. The listing was almost comical in its lack of appeal. The photos were dark and blurry. The description was a single, uninspired sentence. Retail space available, motivated owner. The address was on a slightly neglected street, just a few blocks from the main downtown drag. It was a risk, but the price was low enough that I couldn't ignore it. I called the number and a gruff, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Yeah." "Hello," I said, my voice sounding small and uncertain. "I'm calling about the commercial space for rent on Elm Street." There was a pause. "You seen it?" "Only the pictures online," I admitted. "Pictures don't do the dump justice," he grumbled. "Meet me there in an hour if you still want to waste your time. Name's Arthur." And he hung up. When I arrived, I understood what he meant. The building was even more forlorn in person. The windows were grimy, the paint on the door was peeling, and a faded sign for Vance's Diner hung crookedly above the entrance. Inside, it was a cavern of dust and forgotten memories. Booths with ripped vinyl seats were pushed against one wall. A long counter was covered in a thick layer of grime, and the air smelled stale and sad. It was a wreck. A man who I assumed was Arthur was standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed over his barrel chest. He was in his 60s with a face full of deep lines, a shock of unruly gray hair, and weary eyes that seemed to have seen it all. He watched me as I walked around, my heels clicking on the dusty linoleum floor. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked. I looked past the dirt and the decay. I saw the high ceilings, the beautiful exposed brick wall hiding beneath peeling plaster, and the large front windows that, with a good cleaning, would let in a flood of morning light. I could see it. I could see where the coffee bar would go, where cozy armchairs would sit, where people would gather and talk. "So," Arthur's voice broke the silence, "still interested in this mausoleum?" "It has potential," I said quietly, running a hand over the dusty counter. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's what they all say. What's your grand plan?" "Another yoga studio. A vape shop." I took a deep breath. This was it. The first time I was saying my dream out loud to an elite stranger. "A cafe," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "A place for the community. Good coffee, simple food, a comfortable place to sit." He squinted at me, his gaze sharp and appraising. He wasn't laughing, he wasn't smirking. He was just watching me. "You got a business plan, cafe girl?" My heart leaped. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. My weapon. I handed it to him. His calloused hands took it, and he grunted at the weight. He walked over to one of the dusty booths, wiped a clean spot with his sleeve, and sat down. He opened the binder to the first page. For the next hour, he sat there, in complete silence, reading. He didn't just skim it, he read every single word. He studied the financial projections, his finger tracing the columns of numbers. He stared at the floor plans I had drawn up. The silence was deafening. I just stood there, my hands clasped in front of me, feeling like I was defending a thesis. Finally, he closed the binder with a soft thud. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. My stomach was in knots. "It's good," he said, his voice flat. He tapped the cover of the binder. "It's meticulous, researched. It's too good for this dump." I felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. "So you'll lease it to me?" He shook his head slowly. "No." My heart plummeted. "Oh, I see. I'm sorry to have wasted your time." "You didn't waste my time," he said, holding up a hand. "I'm not leasing it to you because this place is a money pit. The wiring is shot. The plumbing's a disaster. It would eat up all your startup capital before you sold a single cup of coffee. You'd fail." He paused, his gaze intense. But the plan is solid. The woman who wrote this plan, she's not a failure. He stood up and walked towards me. This used to be my place, he said, his voice softening with a hint of old pain. Fance's diner. Had it for 20 years, best burgers in town. I built it from nothing. Then I got older. Brought on a partner to help run the day-to-day, a guy I trusted like a brother. He was smooth, charming, a lot like the husbands of the ladies who lunch, I imagine. He looked at me knowingly. He bled me dry. A little here, a little there. Cooked the books so cleverly I didn't notice until the bank came to shut me down. Lost everything. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. The world is full of sharks, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. They smell passion and they mistake it for weakness. They see a dream, and they see a meal. You've got a shark in your life, don't you, kid? I just nodded, unable to speak. I thought so, he said. I see it in your eyes, and I see this. He tapped the business plan again. This is a fortress. You just need the right general to help you build it. He stuck out his hand. My name is Arthur Vance. I'll be your mentor. I'll help you find the right location, navigate the permits, deal with the suppliers. I know every trick and every trap in this business. In return, I want a small piece of the profits when you're up and running. He saw the hesitation on my face. My motive is simple, he added, his voice firm. I'm a bitter old man who lost. I want to see one of us win for a change. I looked at his outstretched hand, then into his weary but determined eyes. He wasn't offering me a handout. He was offering me a partnership, an alliance. For the first time since that horrible dinner, I didn't feel alone. I took his hand. It was rough and strong. Okay, Arthur, I said. You've got a deal. The next 6 months were the hardest, most grueling period of my life. It was a brutal, dizzying, and utterly exhausting blur of work. My life became a carefully constructed lie, a house of cards I prayed would not collapse. By day, I was Clara Blackwood, the attentive wife. I made sure Mark's suits were dry cleaned. The house was immaculate, and dinner was on the table when he walked in the door. I listened to his complaints about demanding clients and incompetent junior associates, all while nodding in the right places, but the moment he was asleep, or gone for the day, I transformed. I became Clara Davies, aspiring entrepreneur. My secret office in the guest room was my sanctuary and my prison. The walls became a mosaic of sticky notes with reminders about health code regulations, payroll tax deadlines, and the contact information for potential suppliers. My nights were not filled with sleep, but with online courses. I learned about the razor-thin profit margins of the food and beverage industry, the complex dance of inventory management, and the labyrinthine world of commercial leases. Arthur was my gruff, no-nonsense guide through it all. We met 2 or 3 times a week in dingy coffee shops on the other side of town, places where I was sure I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. He would drill me relentlessly. What's your projected food cost percentage? He'd bark, stirring his black coffee. Who are your top 3 choices for a dairy supplier? What's their delivery schedule and what are their payment terms? What's your contingency plan if your espresso machine breaks down on a Monday morning? He was tough, unforgiving, and exactly what I needed. He wasn't just teaching me how to run a cafe, he was teaching me how to think like a business owner. He was forcing me to be 10 steps ahead, to anticipate problems before they arose. Under his guidance, I refined my business plan until it was an ironclad document. We decided the first physical step shouldn't be a full-scale cafe, but something smaller, a way to test the market and build a reputation. Proof of concept, Arthur called it. That's how my pop-up stall at the weekend farmers market was born. I operated it under my new LLC, C. Davies Enterprises, a name that felt both anonymous and powerful. Every Saturday and Sunday morning, I would wake up at 4 a.m., long before Mark was even stirring. I'd load up my car with coffee thermoses, freshly baked scones and muffins I'd prepared the night before, and a folding table. The exhaustion was a physical weight on my body. There were days I felt like a zombie, my mind foggy with sleep deprivation. The tangible struggle was immense and immediate. My first weekend at the market was a near disaster. I underestimated the morning rush, ran out of coffee by 9 a.m., and my cash box was a chaotic mess. I went home that Sunday feeling utterly defeated, with barely enough money to cover the cost of my ingredients. But on Monday, Arthur made me sit down and analyze every single mistake. "So you screwed up," he said, completely unfazed. "Good, now you know what not to do. What did you learn?" Week by week, I got better. I streamlined my process, adjusted my inventory, and started to build a small but loyal following of customers who loved my dark roast coffee and lemon poppy seed scones. But the biggest hurdle was still ahead: money. The profits from the farmers market were modest, enough to keep the pop-up going, but not nearly enough to fund a brick-and-mortar location. My $30,000 inheritance was my seed money, but I needed a real small business loan. With Arthur's help, I prepared a loan application for a local community bank. I put on my most professional suit, walked in with my pristine business plan, and my modest but promising sales data from the market stall, and I gave the presentation of my life. I felt confident. I felt prepared. 2 weeks later, I received a thin, sterile envelope in the mail, addressed to Miss Clara Davies. I opened it with trembling hands. The first word I saw was regret. The bank regretted to inform me that my application had been denied. The reason cited was my lack of commercial experience. The letter felt like a physical punch to the gut. All the sleepless nights, all the hard work, all the risk for nothing. I had failed. The banker's cold, corporate words echoed the sneering tone in Mark's voice. "You're not a real business person. Stick to your hobbies." I slumped into a chair at my kitchen table, the rejection letter crinkling in my fist. The tears I had held back for so long finally came. I cried for my wasted effort, for my foolish hope, for the crushing reality that maybe Mark and Jessica were right all along. I was just a bored housewife, playing a game I didn't understand. I picked up the phone and called Arthur, my voice thick with tears. "I can't do this," I sobbed into the phone. "I'm done. They were right. It was a stupid dream." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I expected him to say, "I told you so," or to just give up on me. Instead, his voice came through, firm and steady. "So you got knocked down. Are you going to stay on the mat? Or are you going to get back up?" He didn't offer pity. He offered a challenge. "Every no gets you closer to a yes, kid. This is part of it. The part where it gets hard. The part where most people quit. Now stop crying, pull out that rejection letter, and let's figure out what they didn't like. We're going to fix it, and go to the next bank and the next one after that, if we have to." His tough love was the jolt I needed. The self-pity began to recede, replaced once again by that slow-burning anger. I was not a failure. I was not a joke, and I would not quit. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and picked up the rejection letter. The grind wasn't over. It had just gotten harder. And I was ready for the fight. After the first loan rejection, Arthur and I changed our strategy. Instead of big impersonal banks, we targeted smaller, local credit unions, places that prided themselves on investing in the community. It took another 2 months of applications, meetings, and relentless follow-ups. But finally we found one. The loan officer, a woman named Maria, saw past my lack of commercial experience and focused on the meticulous detail of my business plan and the steady, growing income from my farmer's market stall. She saw the passion and the grit. We secured a modest loan, not as much as I had hoped for, but enough. Enough to make the dream real. With the loan approved, the search for a location became real. Arthur, using his decades of connections, found a promising spot. It was a former bookstore on a street with a good mix of offices and residential apartments. The rent was reasonable, and the landlord was willing to work with us on the lease terms. Everything was falling into place. My budget was stretched to its absolute breaking point. Every single dollar accounted for. There was no room for error. This is when the first real test of my integrity arrived, and it came in the form of a coffee bean supplier. His name was Sid, a slick, fast-talking salesman who promised me the world. He offered me a deal on wholesale coffee beans that seemed too good to be true. His price was nearly 30% below the market rate from the ethical fair trade suppliers I had been vetting. "It's a special deal, just for you," Sid said with a wide, toothy grin during our meeting. "A little welcome to the neighborhood gift. This will solve all your budget problems, sweetheart. Guarantee you a profit margin your competitors can only dream of." The offer was incredibly tempting. The money I would save by going with Sid would give me the breathing room I desperately needed. It would mean I could afford a better sign, or an extra part-time employee. The pressure was immense. My logical brain, the one that had been staring at spreadsheets for months, was screaming at me to take the deal. It was the smart financial move. But my gut, the part of me that was building this cafe as an extension of my own values, felt a knot of unease. I told Sid I needed a day to think about it. That night, I called Arthur. I laid out the situation, the numbers, the incredible savings. "What do you think?" I asked, secretly hoping he would tell me to take the deal, to be pragmatic. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I had a supplier like that once. For my meat. Gave me an incredible price. Said it was grade A, but it always came in unmarked boxes. For a year, my food costs were the lowest in town. My profits were up." He paused, and I could hear the weight of the memory in his voice. Then a reporter from the local paper did an exposé on a black market meat distributor. Turns out, my guy was buying expired low-grade product from them and reselling it. My diner's name was in the first paragraph of that article. It didn't matter that I didn't know. The damage was done. My reputation was ruined long before my partner finished robbing me blind. He let that sink in before he continued. That small lie about the meat was the first crack in the foundation. It was the first time I chose the easy way over the right way. And it made it easier to ignore the other little red flags that came later. He didn't tell me what to do, he just asked a simple question. "What kind of business are you building, Clara? One you can be proud of? Or one that's built on a lie?" After I hung up the phone, I sat in my secret office for a long time. Sid's offer was the easy path. It was the path of compromise, of looking the other way for the sake of profit. It was the kind of decision Mark would have made in a heartbeat, laughing at anyone who would choose the harder, more expensive route. He called it being smart. I was starting to realize it was just being hollow. The next morning I did some digging. I used the research skills I had honed over the past months, aided by a few discreet calls from Arthur to his old contacts in the restaurant world. The truth came out. Side's beans were being sourced from a large conglomerate, notorious for using farms that exploited their workers and engaged in environmentally destructive practices. There was a reason they were so cheap. The cost wasn't just monetary. It was being paid by people thousands of miles away. I called Sid and told him I was declining his offer. He was shocked, then condescending. "Your loss, sweetheart," he sneered. "Have fun trying to make a profit with those overpriced feel-good beans." I hung up, my heart pounding, but my conscience clear. I immediately signed a contract with a local roaster who partnered with a cooperative of small fair trade farms in Guatemala. It was more expensive. It tightened my budget to a terrifying, razor-thin margin where a single unexpected expense could sink me. But it was the right decision. It was a declaration. My cafe, the daily grind, wasn't just going to be a business, it was going to be a reflection of my principles. I wasn't just building a company, I was rebuilding myself. And this new version of Clara Davies would not be built on a foundation of lies. The exhaustion of my double life finally caught up with me. I made a rookie mistake, a careless slip-up born of pure fatigue. I had ordered a small, commercial-grade espresso machine for the new location, and in a moment of distraction, I'd used the joint credit card instead of my C. Davies Enterprises card. It was a stupid, amateur error, and I knew it the second I saw the email confirmation. But it was too late to cancel. I just prayed Mark wouldn't notice the charge on the statement. Of course, he noticed. Mark noticed every line item on our statements. He prided himself on his financial acumen, which mostly meant he monitored my spending with an eagle eye. A week later, he confronted me. He didn't yell, not at first. He walked into the living room, holding the paper statement, his expression a mask of cold disappointment. "Clara," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Can you explain this? A $5,000 charge from a restaurant supply company." The facade I had so carefully maintained for months crumbled in an instant. There was no plausible lie I could tell. "It's for the cafe," I mumbled, my face flushing with heat. His calmness evaporated. His eyes narrowed into slits of fury. "The cafe?" he seethed, the words coming out in a low hiss. "You're still playing with this ridiculous, pathetic fantasy behind my back? Spending our money on your little hobby? It's not your money, Mark." I shot back, a surge of defiance cutting through my fear. "It was from my grandmother's inheritance. I just used the wrong card by accident. It all goes into the same pot, Clara. The pot that I fill," he roared. He wasn't just angry about the money. He was furious about the secrecy, about the fact that I had a world he didn't control. He felt threatened. The man who had laughed at my dream was now enraged by it. That was the beginning of the attack. It was no longer about mockery. It was about destruction. He and Jessica launched a subtle but vicious campaign to crush my burgeoning enterprise before it could even begin. The first blow came from Jessica. A few days later, I checked the online page for my farmer's market stall. My 5-star rating had plummeted. There were 2 new, scathing 1-star reviews, posted anonymous. One claimed the coffee was burnt and tasted like dirt, and the other complained about the rude, incompetent service from the frazzled-looking woman running the stall. The language was pure, Jessica, cutting, personal, and designed to inflict maximum damage. I knew it was her. My hands shook as I read the words. The second blow came from Mark, and it was far more dangerous. He used his power, his professional network to wound me. I was in the final stages of signing the lease for the former bookstore. The contracts were drawn up. Then I got a call from the landlord. He was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Davies," he said. "There's been a snag. The city's zoning board has flagged this property for a review. Someone raised a concern about a new food establishment increasing traffic and noise in the neighborhood. It could take months to resolve. I can't hold the property for you that long." I knew instantly it was Mark. He had friends on every board and committee in the city. A single phone call, a casual concern raised over lunch, was all it took. He had weaponized his influence to sabotage me. The landlord, a risk-averse man, got nervous and backed out of our deal completely. The location was gone. The loan I had fought so hard for was now in jeopardy because it was tied to that specific property. I was devastated. It felt like they had won. They had cornered me and systematically destroyed my chances. I had the money, I had the plan, but they had blocked my path. I drove to Arthur's grimy, derelict diner, the place where our alliance had been forged. I walked in and just sank into one of the dusty booths, my head in my hands. "It's over," I told him, my voice flat and defeated. "He did it. He killed it. He called someone at the city." The landlord backed out. "I have nothing." Arthur listened to the whole story without saying a word. He just sat across from me, his expression grim. I expected him to tell me it was a good run, that we'd tried our best. I expected him to finally admit defeat. Instead, a slow, grim smile spread across his face. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a strange light. "Don't you see, kid?" he said, his voice a low growl. "This is fantastic news." "Fantastic?" I asked, looking up at him in disbelief. "Arthur, I'm ruined." "No, you're not," he said, tapping his finger on the table for emphasis. "You're a threat. You've been a threat for months, and you were just too busy and too tired to see it. Think about it. First, they laughed at you. Laughter is for things you don't take seriously. It's for jokes. But now," he leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "Now they're not laughing anymore. Now they're fighting you. They're using their power to stop you. People don't try to sabotage a hobby, Clara. They try to sabotage a rival. They're scared of you." He sat back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. "This is how you know you're finally in the game." I sat in Arthur's dusty office, the smell of stale coffee and old paper hanging in the air. The initial shock of his strange optimism was wearing off, but I still felt a profound sense of hopelessness. Being a threat was cold comfort when my plans were in ashes around me. The perfect location was gone, the loan was in limbo, and Mark was actively working against me. I was outmaneuvered, outgunned, and utterly exhausted. "It doesn't matter if I'm a threat, Arthur," I said, my voice heavy with defeat. "A threat with no army is just a target. I have nowhere to go. Every decent location will have the same zoning issues if Mark decides to make a call." Arthur was staring out the grimy window, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Maybe you're thinking too small," he said, almost to himself. "You're looking for a foxhole when you should be looking for a fortress." Just then, his ancient flip phone buzzed on the desk. He grunted, annoyed by the interruption, and flipped it open. "Vance," he barked into the receiver. He listened for a moment, his eyebrows shooting up. "Say that again, Phil. The whole building? You're kidding me." No, I know a few people who might be interested. Send me the details." He hung up the phone, a strange electric energy about him. "That was Phil Jenkins," he said, his eyes wide. "He's a commercial real estate broker. One of the old guard, an elderly couple he's represented for 50 years are finally retiring. They're looking to offload their primary asset in a quiet, private sale. They don't want the hassle of a public listing, they want a single buyer, a clean transaction, and they want it done fast." "What asset?" I asked, my curiosity piqued, despite my despair. Arthur turned to his ancient desktop computer, which whirred to life with the sound of a jet engine. He typed in the address Phil had given him. An image of a sleek, modern high-rise building filled the screen. It was all glass and steel, a gleaming monument to corporate power in the heart of the financial district. "The Sterling Tower," Arthur breathed, a note of awe in his voice. My blood ran cold, my heart stopped. I knew that building. I had dropped Mark off in front of it 1,000 times. I had attended Christmas parties in its sterile, opulent lobby. The Sterling Tower, the prestigious, A-list commercial property where Mark's law firm, Blackwood and Finch, was the anchor tenant. They leased the entire 34th floor. My mind started to race. I looked closer at the picture, at the ground floor of the building, and there it was, a prime, corner retail space. It was empty. The windows were dark. A small "for lease" sign was taped to the inside of the glass. It was the most perfect location for a cafe I had ever seen. The foot traffic would be incredible. A captive audience of thousands of lawyers, bankers, and executives who worked in the building every single day. An idea began to form in my mind. It was an idea so audacious, so terrifying, so completely insane, that I almost laughed out loud. It was a fantasy, a daydream, but then I looked at Arthur, and I saw the same wild spark in his eyes. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's impossible, Arthur. That building must be worth tens of millions of dollars. I have a $30,000 inheritance and a small business loan that's about to be revoked. Don't say no yet, Arthur said, his mind clearly working a mile a minute. He started scribbling numbers on a legal pad. The owners want a quiet sale. That means they might be willing to sell below market value for the convenience. You have your grandmother's money, you have the profits from the farmer's market, your proof of concept, and you have an approved loan from a credit union that believes in you. Maria, at the credit union. She's not just a loan officer, she's a senior VP. She has the power to restructure that loan for a different kind of asset. The idea was still ludicrous. It's not enough, Arthur. Not even close. You're right, he said, not missing a beat. But I told you I lost my diner because of a bad partner. I never told you that before all that. I had some very good ones. He looked me straight in the eye. I have a friend, a silent partner from my early days, who did very, very well for himself. He owes me a favor, a big one. He's always looking for smart, stable real estate investments. If I present this to him, with you as the on-site operator, and your cafe as the ground floor anchor tenant, if I tell him it's a chance to stick it to one of the city's most arrogant law firms, Arthur grinned, a predatory wolfish grin. He'll go for it. He'll cover the gap. We'll form a new holding company. You, me, and him. But your LLC, C. Davies Enterprises, will be the majority shareholder and the public face of the ownership. My head was spinning. Buying the building. The entire building. Not just renting a small storefront, but owning the very ground Mark walked on every day. It was a leap from playing checkers to playing three-dimensional chess. The sheer scale of it was dizzying. It was a move so bold, so far beyond anything Mark could conceive of me doing, that it was the perfect camouflage. He would never, in a million years, see it coming. This is how you don't just win the battle, Clara, Arthur said, his voice low and intense. This is how you win the whole damn war. This is how you checkmate him. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of secret meetings, frantic phone calls, and terrifying legal documents. We worked out the impossible logistics. I met with Maria at the credit union, who, after her initial shock, saw the genius of the plan. A loan for an unproven cafe was a risk. A mortgage for a fully occupied premium commercial building with a solid new anchor tenant. My cafe was a sound investment. She restructured the loan. Arthur brought in his silent partner, a wealthy retired investor named George, who loved the idea of a story behind his investments. The entire complex transaction was funneled through C. Davies Enterprises. When the final papers were signed, I sat in the lawyer's office, my hand aching from my signature. I was the majority owner of the Sterling Tower. I was in total secrecy, Mark's landlord. I thought about him, up on the 34th floor, laughing with his partners, completely oblivious. He thought he had crushed my small, pathetic dream. He had no idea I had just bought his entire world. A year flew by in a flash of controlled chaos. The ground floor space in the Sterling Tower was transformed. The dark, empty shell became the daily grind, and it was more beautiful than I had ever imagined. It had warm lighting, comfortable leather armchairs, a long reclaimed wood coffee bar, and that beautiful exposed brick wall I had always dreamed of. We opened our doors on a Tuesday morning, and the response was instantaneous and overwhelming. We were the talk of the financial district. Lawyers, traders, and administrative asterisk from every floor of the building flooded in. The convenience was unbeatable, but they came back for the quality. My ethically sourced Guatemalan coffee was a hit, and my lemon poppy seed scones became the stuff of legend. Mark knew, of course, that I had opened a cafe in his building. He found it pathetically amusing. To him, it was the ultimate proof of his point. I had a little hobby, and it was conveniently located right downstairs from his world of real work. He'd sometimes stop in with his colleagues, a condescending smirk on his face. "Looks like my wife is keeping all of you properly caffeinated," he'd announce loudly, making sure everyone knew the connection. I'd just smile politely from behind the counter, my heart pounding a steady, secret rhythm of triumph. The irony was delicious. He would frequently complain to me at home about the uptight new owners of the building. "I don't know who these people are," he'd grumble over dinner. "Some faceless corporation out of Delaware. They've changed all the rules. The parking garage access codes were updated, and we only got 12 hours notice. And they're suddenly militant about after-hours HVAC usage. It's ridiculous." Every one of those new rules had been implemented by me, in consultation with the building's longtime property manager, the very professional and impartial Mr. Henderson. Henderson had witnessed Mark's arrogance for years, and he seemed to take a quiet, professional satisfaction in enforcing the new, stricter policies I put in place. He would send memos to all tenants on behalf of the new ownership, and I would watch Mark read them with mounting frustration, completely unaware that the faceless corporation was his wife. One evening in early December, I came home to find a thick, gilded invitation lying on the kitchen counter. My name was next to Mark's in elegant calligraphy. It was an invitation to a massive gala at a five-star hotel. Mark's firm, Blackwood and Finch, was being honored as Law Firm of the Year by the City Bar Association. Mark came into the kitchen, beaming with pride. "You have to come, Clara," he said, his voice magnanimous. "It's the biggest night of my career. Everyone will be bay." He draped an arm over my shoulder, his touch feeling foreign and unwelcome. "It'll be good for you," he added, his tone shifting to that familiar patronizing warmth. "A chance to get out of that little coffee shop for a night and see what real success looks like." The invitation felt like a trap. It was a command performance on the biggest stage of his life. I could already imagine it. He on the podium accepting his award, and me, the dutiful wife, the hobbyist, watching from the audience. It would be the anniversary dinner all over again, but on a much grander scale. A final, public humiliation. My first instinct was to say no, to claim I had to work. My resolve wavered. The weight of the secret, the long hours, the constant performance, it was all catching up to me. I felt a tremor of the old fear, the old insecurity. Could I really go through with this? I excused myself and went into my home office. No longer a secret guest room, but a real office in the home I now solely owned, though he didn't know that yet. I closed the door and called the one person who would understand. "Arthur," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's invited me to this awards gala. It's a setup. I know it is." Arthur listened patiently as I explained the situation, my voice trembling with anxiety. When I was done, there was a long silence on the line. Then he let out a low chuckle. It wasn't a mocking laugh like Mark's. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated delight. "Clara, Clara, Clara," he said, his voice full of warmth. "You're seeing it all wrong. This isn't a trap, it's a stage. It's the stage you've been building for a year." He paused, letting his words sink in. "He thinks he's inviting the bored housewife from the first floor. He has no idea he's inviting the queen to her own coronation." His words cut through my fear like a hot knife through butter. He was right. Mark was creating the perfect venue for a reveal. I hadn't even dared to plan. He was handing me the microphone. "Go," Arthur said, his voice firm and strong. "Go and let them all see who you really are." I hung up the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, thrilling resolve. I would go to the gala. But I wouldn't be going as Mrs. Clara Blackwood, the supportive wife. I would be attending as Miss Clara Davies, the owner of the Sterling Tower. And the show was about to begin. The ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was a sea of black ties and sequined gowns. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a golden glow on the city's legal and financial elite. It was a room suffocating with power and money. A year ago, I would have been terrified, my hands clammy, my smile plastered on as I clung to Mark's arm. But tonight, I felt a strange and powerful calm. I had walked in alone, having told Mark I would meet him there. I wasn't wearing a flashy look-at-me gown, I had chosen a simple, elegant midnight blue dress. It was a dress that spoke of quiet confidence, not desperation. It was a dress that said, I belong here, not I'm trying to belong. I saw Mark across the room, holding court, with a group of judges. He spotted me and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. I had defied his unspoken rule to arrive as a couple. He made his way over, his smile tight. There you are, he said. You look nice. The word was a dull thud, a clear sign he was underwhelmed by my understated choice. His sister Jessica materialized at his side, looking me up and down with a critical eye. Clara, darling, she cooed. That's a very simple dress. But I suppose it's practical. Her dig, which once would have sent a hot spike of shame through me, now felt laughably transparent. I just smiled. A real, genuine smile. Thank you, Jessica. I like it. My calmness seemed to unnerve them. They expected me to be intimidated, to be the nervous, out-of-place wife. My refusal to play that part threw them off balance. I spent the cocktail hour mingling on my own, speaking with a few of my cafe regulars who were surprised to see me there. I also found my other guest for the evening. Mr. Henderson, the property manager of the Sterling Tower, stood near the back of the room, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. He gave me a subtle, professional nod. He was my ace in the hole. The setup for my public execution began during the main event. After a series of smaller awards, the president of the Bar Association took the stage to announce the law firm of the year. When he called out Blackwood and Finch, the room erupted in applause. Mark, looking like a conquering hero, ascended the stage, followed by his senior partners. He took the podium, his face flushed with victory. He thanked the partners, the clients, the associates. He was charming, witty, and powerful. And then, his eyes found me in the audience. The condescending smirk I knew so well played on his lips. And finally, he said, his voice booming through the sound system, I have to thank my wonderful wife, Clara. A spotlight swung to our table. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. My mother, Brenda, seated next to me, gave my arm a nervous squeeze, her unspoken plea for me to just smile and look proud. Clara has shown us all the importance of having a hobby you love, Mark continued. A clear reference to my cafe. It's so important to have a little passion project to keep you busy. And she's done a wonderful job with hers, right downstairs from where the real work gets done. A ripple of uncomfortable, polite laughter went through the crowd. It was the anniversary dinner, all over again. He was branding me as the little woman with the little hobby. She keeps our lawyers caffeinated, our paralegals fed. And for that, we are all truly grateful. It was a pat on the head in front of 500 people. But he wasn't done. He decided to take one more shot. A final arrogant jab at an anonymous enemy. Speaking of our building, he went on, shaking his head with theatrical frustration. I can't say the same for our new landlords. A real piece of work. Anonymous, faceless, and obsessed with rules. I guess that's what you get when these massive, soulless corporations buy up the city. That was the cue. As if on a hidden signal, Mr. Henderson began to walk from the back of the room toward the stage. He moved with a quiet, unhurried purpose. Mark, caught mid-speech, looked down, his expression shifting from triumph to annoyance at the interruption. Who was this man daring to approach the stage during his moment of glory? Mr. Henderson reached the steps of the stage and stopped. He cleared his throat, and the microphone picked up the small sound. Mr. Blackwood, he said, his voice calm, formal, and carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. My name is David Henderson. I am the property manager for the Sterling Tower. Mark's face tightened. Yes, I know who you are. This isn't really the time. On behalf of the building's owner, Mr. Henderson continued, his voice overriding Mark's, I would like to congratulate you and your firm on this prestigious award. He paused, letting the formal words hang in the air. In fact, she wanted to extend her congratulations to you personally. The entire room was frozen, confused. A low murmur started to build. Shh. Mr. Henderson turned his head slowly and looked directly at my table. He gestured, a simple, elegant movement of his hand, directly toward me. The spotlight was still on me. The entire room followed his gesture. 500 pairs of eyes. Mark's confused gaze followed theirs, and his eyes landed on me. Mr. Henderson's voice rang out, clear as a bell, into the stunned silence. Miss Davies, the final lease renewal documents for Blackwood and Finch are ready for your review tomorrow morning. The silence in the ballroom was no longer just quiet. It was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothered all sound and breath. It was a silence so profound you could hear the blood pounding in your own ears. Mark froze. He stood at the podium, his mouth slightly agape, the triumphant smile still etched on his face, but now looking like a grotesque frozen mask. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly white. He looked like a statue. Jessica's jaw literally dropped. The glass of champagne in her hand tilted, forgotten, and then slipped from her fingers. It hit the polished floor with a sharp, explosive crash that seemed to echo in the cavernous silence. The sound broke the spell for a moment, and a collective gasp rippled through the room. Ms. Davies, Mark finally stammered. The word was a choked, strangled whisper, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the room. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Clara, you're the owner. Mr. Henderson, standing at the foot of the stage like a harbinger of doom, gave a slight, impeccably professional nod. He didn't need to raise his voice. His words were precise, clinical, and devastating. Mrs. Clara Davies is the sole proprietor of Davies Enterprises, the holding company that acquired the Sterling Tower 10 months ago. The ripple effect was instantaneous and seismic. At the back of the room, I saw Arthur. He wasn't smiling. He was beaming, his entire face alight with a fierce, paternal pride. He raised his glass to me in a silent toast. Mark's senior partners, standing on stage with him, were completely speechless. Their heads swiveled back and forth between me and Mark, the power dynamics of their entire world visibly recalibrating in real time. My mother, Brenda, looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was ashen, her eyes filled with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The perfect family image she had clung to for so long had just been publicly detonated. The microphone on the podium was still live. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady, and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me as if I were royalty. I walked up the steps, my simple blue dress suddenly feeling like a suit of armor. I reached the podium and gently took the microphone from Mark's limp, unresisting hand. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces, and for the first time I felt no fear. My voice was clear and steady when I spoke. Mark was right about one thing, I began, my gaze sweeping across the room before landing on him. It's important to have a dream. I paused, letting the words settle. But it's more important to have the courage to build it yourself, especially when the people closest to you tell you it's worthless. I looked directly into Mark's pale, horrified eyes. His world, his arrogance, his entire sense of superiority was collapsing right there on stage, and he knew that everyone was watching it happen. My hobby, I said, my voice ringing with a strength I never knew I possessed, now owns the roof over your head. The lease renewal for Blackwood and Finch is on my desk. We can discuss the new terms next week. Congratulations on your award. I placed the microphone deliberately back on its stand. The click echoed through the silent room. Then, I turned and walked off the stage, leaving a bomb crater of shock, awe, and shattered arrogance in my wake. Months later, the world was a different color. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. Mark, stripped of his power and publicly humbled, had no fight left in him. I was sitting in a cozy armchair in the corner of my cafe. The daily grind, the morning sun streamed through the large, clean windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The place was bustling. The low hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clinking of ceramic mugs. It was the symphony I had dreamed of for so long. Arthur sat across from me, sipping a black coffee, a rare, genuine smile on his face, as he watched the morning rush. He had his small percentage of the profits, but more than that, he had his victory. We had won. A young woman at a nearby table was sketching in a notebook, her face a mask of intense concentration. She looked up, caught my eye, and gave me a small, shy smile. I smiled back. This was it. This was what I had built. Not just a business, but a space, a community, a sanctuary. The victory at the gala had been thrilling, a spectacular moment of vindication. But sitting here now, in the quiet hum of my own success, I realized the true victory wasn't about the revenge. It wasn't about Mark's face turning pale, or Jessica dropping her champagne. That was just the closing of a painful chapter. The real victory was this: the freedom, the peace, the quiet confidence of knowing I had built something real, and something good, entirely on my own terms. I had stopped trying to earn a place at someone else's table. I had built my own. My story is proof that the most powerful thing you can do is invest in yourself, especially when no one else will. Your worth is not determined by someone else's opinion of your dreams. What labels have you refused to accept? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories of defiance. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning pain into power. Thanks for watching.